Jason, you know what? I'm really depressed the 90s are over.
Yeah, so's Kenny.
Kenny's very depressed. Very happy.
Actually,
maybe he's happy the 90s are over.
He's like, when the 90s hit, I'm not going to be the huge star that I am now. Why are you so depressed about the 90s being over?
I love the 90s.
I did too.
I had a great time in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was a brilliant decade for music.
It was, and we've talked about this decade many times, but we've never devoted an entire show to it. So I think, having that in mind, I think we should do a show about the 90s. And it's not just grunge.
Let's do it! Vinyl peeps, welcome to the show. Are you ready to party like it's 1999?
I'm ready to party like it's 1990 something. Yeah.
The 90s.
I partied a lot in the 90s.
Indeed.
Turned 21 in the 90s. It was a good time to be alive.
It was a great decade.
It was, but the one thing that people always assume is that as soon as Nirvana became a big deal, that everything was grunge, and it wasn't.
No, it was a very diverse decade, and it was a diverse decade for the airwaves. That was the thing that I think that changed in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, you had all of the like hard rock. I call it hard rock or 80s rock. A lot of people call it hair metal.
Yeah.
Or whatever. That kind of was ushered out, and there were still some hangers on from that genre in the early 90s. But then, as soon as Nevermind was released, it all bets were off.
Yeah.
But it was a fun time to listen to the radio, though.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, 90s music, we just saw the rise of diverse music trends, which is kind of cool for everybody who is into music because it was everything. It's like somebody put all the different music genres in a bag, shook them up, and dumped them out.
Yeah, well, I mean, and another thing, you had the hard rock and the heavy metal and the grunge, but then the rise of rap and R&B. And, there were even singer-songwriters and many one-hit wonders. I mean, it was a crazy decade.
Yeah, I mean, it was from grunge to the Spice Girls.
Oh, I forgot about the Spice Girls. I've actually seen one of their albums, Spice World, I think, on one of my vinyl groups, and I never buy it.
Yeah, I'm not interested in the Spice Girls.
I'm interested in them.
Well, for a different reason.
But we don't have our Vinyl Ventures record here today.
So Kenny's
he's kind of our co-host.
He'll be our co-host.
From the grave.
From the grave. Thanks, Kenny.
We got a new look here for our 76th and beyond. But no, the 90s to me because when you think about it, the 80s were very diverse too, but most people pigeonhole like the Talking Heads and punk and new wave and stuff to the 80s. There was so much going on in the 80s, and the 90s didn't disappoint either.
No, not at all. I mean, you had everything from Britpop to alternative rock metal, which new metal. Contemporary R&B.
Yeah.
Everything.
And when you look back on it, you start to realize how diverse it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, when I think 90s, like hard rock, I think of Soundgarden.
Yeah.
And I have no Soundgarden on vinyl.
Yeah, that was the thing, because the 90s, more than anything, it was the CD decade.
Yes. So albums weren't limited to, 40 minutes like they were on vinyl. That's the other thing. The 90s ushered in the CD era, and vinyl went away.
Yeah.
So it's the decade that vinyl died.
Yeah.
And the decade that it's coming back from.
Yeah.
And seems to be undead.
And the 90s are, a lot of those albums are highly collectible because they didn't press that many.
Yeah, I mean, one example I can give you is my Van Halen Balance first pressing. You know, it came out in '95, and they released it on CD, cassette, and vinyl, and they didn't print many of those vinyl copies. So yeah, it was kind of a transition period for the industry.
Yeah.
But thank God vinyl came back, right?
Yes. We wouldn't be here if it hadn't.
And the cool thing is there's so much good music from the 90s that has never been available on vinyl until now.
Yeah.
Thanks to repops.
Exactly. You know, MTV started in the 80s, but the 90s are really when it took off. I mean, the 90s were kind of about youth culture. Mm-hmm. That's when that really kind of took hold in the American psyche.
Yeah. That's a good point. And, you know, it makes sense that music like grunge was so embraced by so many people because you're right. It was the decade of the younger generation, and they were filled with angst and uncertainty, and, you know, there were wars going on. I mean, it was a crazy time.
Yeah, and I mean, the 90s was full, well, heck, Aerosmith won their Grammy from
Pump.
Pump, yeah.
Yeah. It was a crazy.
So
time.
the rock was still happening, but there were so many other things happening that it kind of watered down rock.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, ska had a third or fourth wave.
Right, Brian Setzer Orchestra and swing music came back.
Yeah, swing music came back. Man. Cherry Poppin' Daddies. Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Yeah.
All of those.
Yeah, it was like every 6 months there was a new genre.
It was a schizophrenic decade.
It really was. But, I mean, hip-hop really dominated the Billboard charts.
Yeah, for sure. And R&B.
Yeah, and R&B. Yeah, hip-hop and R&B.
Yeah. It's fun to look back on it and have this perspective. If you had to choose like one band that you discovered in the 90s, who do you think that would be?
Boy, there's not one.
Yeah.
I mean,
the biggest one to me that's popping up is like the Jayhawks.
Oh, that's when you discovered the Jayhawks? Yeah.
That's when I first heard them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it is one of those crazy decades where until you start flipping through your records, you kind of forget the breadth of the type of music that was.
And country was making big strides. I think one of the biggest selling albums of the 90s is Shania Twain.
Yeah, Come On Over.
Yeah. And
then, of course, you had Garth Brooks. And I was going to bring Garth today, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm kind of getting the idea that our viewership isn't a big fan of country music.
But country was really making big inroads in the 90s.
Yeah, it's really what brought country music to the point that it is at today, is all those records sold in the 90s. So that's a great point.
Everything was crossover.
Right. It's pretty crazy. And speaking of crossover, we want you guys to cross over to our YouTube channel, don't we?
Yes, crossover.
We want you to cross on over there, see all the beautiful things that Jacob and Keith have been helping us put up there. And we want you to like, subscribe, comment, and share. That's all we're going to say.
That's it.
Just hit that subscribe button.
Yeah.
So what's your first example?
Well, you know, since the decade kind of started with grunge, let's start with grunge.
Okay. I'm gonna put Kenny down.
Go down, Kenny. So this is the Nirvana Black Album.
The greatest hits.
Yeah, the greatest hits. And for a long time, this was wrapped up in legal battles. And when it finally came out, we've talked about Nevermind so many times that I wanted to bring something else.
Yeah.
I mean, Nirvana doesn't have a breadth of work.
No. I mean, there are maybe 8 or 9 releases.
Yeah.
But there's a couple live albums. There's like a B-sides and rarities. But this is a great collection for someone who's wanting to dip their toe into Nirvana.
Yeah.
And you've got the Walmart press of this that you haven't even opened.
I haven't even opened it because I've got so much Nirvana, especially on CD.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of it digital, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's appropriate to start with this band because if there was one band that you would think would like be the poster children for the decade, it would be Nirvana for sure.
Yeah, they really ushered in change.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I think that's the key that, hey, even though Nevermind was their second album, when Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, it changed everything.
Yeah. And now the funny thing to me is when you listen back to a lot of this music that sounded so different and so, singular at the time, it's just hard rock.
Yeah.
You know?
It really is.
It's just distorted guitars, hard rock, and guys screaming, basically.
The song's so iconic.
Yeah.
But I've heard it so many times.
Yeah. It's one that I don't have to hear again.
Yeah.
There you have Kurt and his guitar.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that Nirvana's entire catalog isn't like essential.
Yeah.
But this is a really good collection.
It's a great album.
Yeah. And the legal battles were between the guys in the band and Courtney Love, right?
Yeah. Well, and the record company.
And the record company.
It was a mess.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad they got it straightened out.
Yeah, I'm super glad they got it straightened out.
Yeah. That's an excellent first band to talk about.
Yeah, you can't do a 90s show and not talk about Nirvana. They are the elephant in the room when it comes to the 90s.
I love these Walmart presses. I'm convinced they're pressed in the same places that you can get other versions of this. But this is like a milky, what do they call it? Smoke-colored vinyl.
Yeah, they do Walmart pressings, they do a lot of colored vinyl.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of it's almost like an Easter egg opening up. Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah, kind of a gimmick.
Yeah.
But it is cool. Like the AC/DC 50th anniversary stuff they've been doing is really cool.
And it all sounds really good.
Yeah.
I haven't had a Walmart press that sounds like,
Me neither. I might have a Walmart press of a band's album later in the show. That's a good one, man. Excellent.
You're up. What's your next or your first 90s pick?
I'm making a damn mess over here. So my first one, this was an RSD release a couple years ago, and it's on pink vinyl. Everybody knows Space Hog.
Yes.
And this is Resident Alien by Space Hog. The song came out, and it was almost like they'd passed a law that it had to be played every 5 minutes. But it is so good, and it almost sounds like new David Bowie.
Yeah.
That's the best way that I can describe these guys. This came out in October of 95. It was certified gold on July 29, 1996, and included In the Meantime, which was the big single, which reached the top of the mainstream rock charts. I love the artwork. I love the songs. I love the breadth of the music on the album. And it's just one that I had to include because when this came out and was released on RSD.
It was an RSD release, and then they re-released it.
And then they re-released it, but I wanted the RSD release. And I'm not going to bother taking it out of the condo and looking at the pink vinyl. But so this one has In the Meantime, Space Hog, Starside, Candyman, Space is the Place, Never Coming Down, Cruel to Be Kind, Everybody in the World is Bent. There's a spoken line in the middle of Never Coming Down, Everybody in the World is Bent, and that comes from the 1969 movie The Italian Job. And the movie also features jail inmates clapping out the rhythm used in this song. In a tribute to the film Candyman, the chorus to Candyman repeats the titular name 4 times, also referencing Sammy Davis Jr., originally appearing in the 1971 film Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So there's little Easter eggs all over this. And I love the pictures of these guys on the back too.
Yeah.
And they've got the passport stamps. So they're kind of doing that.
And they do look like passport photos.
Yeah, they're
like, you can't smile.
Yeah. You got Ray Ant, Johnny, and Rich. The whole album, they did it. The album after this one is called the Chinese album, and it's really good too. But this one, that in the meantime, just took off, and it's got a really cool bass line that starts it out. And I always love those songs that are really kind of heavy on the bass lines.
Yeah, I like heavy bass.
But Space Hog, Resident Alien, on pink vinyl. What's your next one?
Well, I'm going to have another elephant in the room. Pearl Jam.
Of course.
10. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to talk about the 90s without Pearl Jam because they had so many releases in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And that's really when they're probably, when you ask me about bands, when I discovered Pearl Jam, I was blown away.
Yeah. They sort of became maybe not as edgy as Nirvana, maybe not as heavy as Nirvana, but they kind of did become the poster children for the entire decade.
Yeah.
And you have to respect the fact that they're still doing it. They're still putting new music out. They're still touring. This is also the decade when they started to take on Ticketmaster and that whole thing. And
but they stuck to their guns that whole tour.
Yeah.
Which,
Eddie Vedder got political, and maybe alienated some folks with that kind of stuff. But they have always been advocates for their fans, for sure.
They reminded me. They picked up the baton from U2.
Oh yeah.
Because I felt like Eddie Vedder was a lot like Bono.
Yes. That's a great point.
He would climb on, scaffolding.
Yeah.
It was the shows they would put on were just magical.
Yeah. And they always played really long shows. And they were notorious for not playing their hits. So, they were young. They were a young band on fire.
Yeah. I mean, you look at their releases in the 90s, 10 in 91, Versus in 93, Vitology in 94, No Code in 96, Yield in 98. So they, 5 releases.
Yeah.
Or is that 6? That's 5.
I was told there'd be no math.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they were prolific for sure.
Yeah.
They didn't have that huge hit with 10 and then rest on their laurels. I mean, they kept putting music out. And Versus is absolutely my favorite Pearl Jam album. I was going to bring it, but I've talked about it multiple times. So like I said, I've tried to not bring the same stuff.
The song that really took off on 10 was Jeremy.
About a school shooting.
Yeah.
Which kind of foretold what would come.
Yeah, which is very strange.
It's creepy as hell.
Yeah, it is creepy.
Alive is great. Black is great. Why Go? The whole album is just fantastic. And this isn't one that I go back to and listen to a lot. This is one of those bands, like I've said before, that I became a fan when their second album came out. I also love the cover of this, all 5 of them kind of like reaching for the sky. You have to respect a band that's held it together, for 30 whatever years now.
Yeah. And still tours. I mean, and in the 90s, they were touring relentlessly.
Yeah.
So to put out 5 albums.
In the middle of that.
They probably had a tour. They probably toured every single year in the 90s.
Yeah. I mean, that was the time, man. And it was great for concert goers too, because it wasn't prohibitively expensive like it is now.
No.
It's such a great one. That's a great call. Like I said, I would have brought Versus, but y'all don't want to hear me talk about Versus again. So, that's a good one, man.
Well, we do want to hear you talk about your second 90s album. What do you have?
When I said that there was just a breadth of music in the 90s, I mean, think about it. You had Fiona Apple. This is Tidal by Fiona, which has her biggest song, Criminal, on it. And that song and that video, they were on constantly.
Yeah.
But when you think about the women that came of age in the 90s too, you had Fiona, you had Sheryl Crow, Alanis, you had all of these women, Sarah McLachlan, on and on and on. And it wasn't just the grunge decade or, any other type of music. It was also when Lilith Fair started.
Exactly. It's when the girl power really took off.
Yeah,
and I mean, it wasn't just like rock or alternative music. It was across the board because like Missy Elliott, Lauryn Hill.
Yeah, all of them. And not only that, like I said, the Lilith Fair, which was like a festival of female artists that spanned all genres. But then the other thing, Lollapalooza was a 90s thing, Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction. So, festival shows really started gaining ground in the U.S. Now, they've done them in Europe forever, but they really started gaining ground in the U.S. in the 90s. You also had Ozfest.
Yeah, there were tons of festivals happening.
Yeah, Vans Warped Tour, all of that. But anyway, back to Tidal by Fiona. Now, this is her debut album. Came out July 23rd, 1996. It produced 3 singles, Shadowboxer, Sleep to Dream, and Criminal. The latter was the album's most popular single, winning a Grammy for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance in 1998. In 2017, Tidal got its first vinyl run as a Vinyl Me Please exclusive record of the month. Now, this is a Vinyl Me Please pressing, but it's a newer one. I just got it last year. Friend of the show, Jason Russell, is a huge Fiona Apple fan, and until like the last couple of years, he's been trying to collect all of her stuff. But like you said, a lot of stuff wasn't pressed in the 90s.
It's really tough.
So they've repopped them since vinyl came back into vogue, and those have become worth a bunch of money. So he's paid a lot more money for these than I have. But I just love her voice. I love her writing style. She's not one of those artists that's easy to peg.
No.
She's very, there is a very broad type of thing that she does, and she just goes with it. And I've always really, really dug her. I love the picture on the back.
Yeah, the great album art design.
Yeah. This was well received by critics, with Jenny Eliscu of Rolling Stone and Richard Harrington of the Washington Post describing it as a mature effort comparable to the work of singer-songwriters Alanis Morissette, Tori Amos. She's another one. Rolling Stone ranked the album at 83 among the 100 greatest albums of the 90s. And which is kind of crazy. But I totally get it. I mean, she was definitely a huge star when that song took off.
Yeah, and it's funny, out of the grunge scene, Bikini Kill kind of started the Riot Girl movement, which kind of morphed into just girl power.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, like I said, you think of this decade and you immediately just think of like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana. There's so much else.
Yeah.
There's so much other stuff. And that's why I wanted to bring it. I love the cover too.
The cover's great.
The close-up shot of her eyes.
She's staring at me.
Is she?
Yeah.
I think she's staring at Kenny Rogers.
She may be.
What's your next one?
Well, let's do Rage Against the Machine.
Yes.
And this is a Rage live album, because Rage only has 4 albums.
Yep.
That's not a ton.
No. Guns N' Roses basically only has 4 albums.
Yeah.
I mean, this not only was a varied decade, but it was also a decade that brought bands with a lot of issues to the fore. You know what I mean? There have always been issues with Rage Against the Machine. There's always been turmoil.
They're very political.
Yeah, and there's always been inner turmoil and things keeping them from playing. But this is such a good band.
It's such a great band. And the live album, this may even be I know it's a double. It may be even a triple. I don't know. I think
it looks like it's a double.
Yeah, it's a double.
Let's see. Yeah. Yep, it's a double.
So, yeah, they, the song Killing in the Name of.
Yeah.
That kind of put them on the map.
Yeah, but I mean, they were kind of like heavy metal and rap colliding.
Yeah.
And one of the first bands to do that kind of thing.
And it's weird in that song, they pull almost some Zeppelin riffs. It's just, it's across the board.
Yeah. And Tom Morello is such a interesting guitar player. The whole band is so great. And the other thing we need to note is Zach De La Rocha, singer for Rage. When Rage broke up, the other three guys from Rage got together with Chris Cornell and formed Audioslave.
Yeah, so they didn't actually go away. They just morphed into something else.
Yeah, and I didn't bring Audioslave. I didn't even think about it because I don't think... Did that come out in the late 90s? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Go ahead and tell me what you were going to... Tell us what you're going to tell us about Rage.
The funny thing with... Killing in the Name of, it was one of those things that only got to number 25 on the charts, but in Christmas of 2009, it hit the number 1 spot.
That's crazy. After it had been out for
ever
15 years or something. Yeah, that's nutty. But that's one that you hear all the time. That's one that you'll hear at sport, at football games or baseball games.
It's just a great protest song, I guess.
Yeah, and really heavy.
Oh, yeah.
Really just different than anything else that you're probably going to be hearing. Yeah. What else is on this?
And that kind of probably sparked the rise of nu metal.
Yeah.
Because they're not really nu metal. I don't know that you can even put them in a category because they're so different.
Yeah. I mean, protest music, heavy metal, rap. I mean, they're definitely in a space all their own.
Absolutely.
Sure. I love the artwork on this. It's
it's a great
cool. Red, white, and black. It's really awesome.
And they're I think I've only seen Rage one time at a festival,
and
maybe a Lollapalooza. Yeah. And their shows are intense.
Yeah. Yeah. And they got back together like 2 years ago, and Zach ended up breaking his ankle or something. And yeah, kind of sent the band into another spiral. They stopped the tour, and there's no plans to get back together.
Yeah, and their influences go everywhere from Bob Dylan to In Living Color. It's everything.
Bruce Springsteen too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Morello's a big
Springsteen
guy.
when you start looking at the bands that have influenced them, it's like Bad Religion, Clash, Bob Dylan, U2, it's everybody.
Well, they kind of are. I would compare them probably more closely to the Clash than anybody because of the being so passionate about your message and what your political message is.
Yeah.
But they're just doing it with a kind of a different style of music. It's awesome. That's a great call. I don't have any Rage on vinyl.
Yeah, I didn't have any on vinyl either, but I'm like, ooh. When this popped up, I'm like, I want that.
Yeah. That's a good one, man.
Yeah.
I love it. Excellent choice.
You're next.
You heard me say earlier I don't have Soundgarden on vinyl. I do have Temple of the Dog, and we won't spend too much time on this. Everybody knows how much I love this record. Basically, this is Mother Love Bone without their singer, Andy Wood, because he died of an overdose. And so Chris Cornell and the guys from the band got together and basically recorded Temple of the Dog as a tribute to Andy. And the songs on here, man. This came out April 16th, 1991. So this is kind of early on. I mean, real
this
close.
Is definitely in the grunge phase.
Well, right when Nirvana hit is when this came out.
Yeah.
I mean, Eddie Vedder sings on Hunger Strike on this. Hardly anybody knew who Eddie Vedder was when that song was released. So that was kind of was a predecessor for Pearl Jam. But the song Hunger Strike, released January 91. Say Hello to Heaven is the other big one, released June 18, 1991. And Push Him Forward Back, which is so good, also came out in 1991. But it's the only studio album by the band. Like I said, a tribute to Andrew Wood, former lead singer of Malfunction and Mother Love Bone, who died on March 19th, 1990 of a heroin overdose. This album was certified platinum by the RIAA in the U.S. So you have Chris Cornell, who had been Andrew Wood's roommate, and Stone Gossard, Jeff Ament, and the lineup eventually included Soundgarden drummer Matt Cameron and newcomers Mike McReady on lead guitar and Eddie Vedder on vocals. McReady and Vedder were featured on the album due to the involvement with Ament and Gossard's next project, which became Pearl Jam. The name Temple of the Dog is derived from the opening lyrics of the Mother Love Bone song Man of Golden Words. And I just love it. I love this lenticular cover, too, of them playing on stage. It might be hard to see with the record condom on, but then you have, the back.
That's a good one. It's definitely one of those bands that, even though there's just just one album, it's almost an essential to have.
It's kind of a super group
in
reverse, because none of these guys were
super when they made it.
Right. So it's the opposite of like a Traveling Wilburys or something like that. These guys hadn't become the huge stars that they were going to.
Yeah.
And they did this in tribute to their friend.
They were just making music because they like to make music.
Yeah. And when I first heard this, I got it on CD and I was like, man, this is really great. But then when I learned the story of them doing this in tribute to Andrew Wood, it kind of took on a whole new meaning of its own. And it's very emotional to listen to. It's not necessarily a feel-good album, but the song on here, Call Me a Dog, is my favorite. I'm getting chills just thinking of it. It's such a great song. So if you haven't listened to it, go check out Temple
It's definitely
of the Dog.
one to get.
Yeah, and this came as soon as I saw this was being released. I'm like, cha-ching! And I've not seen it.
I haven't either, because I'd love to have it on vinyl.
Well, I'll keep an eye out for you. What's your next one?
Well, next.
How do you like our new record stand, by the way?
I love it.
I do too. Oh my gosh.
Beck, Odelay.
The 90s were his decade.
They really were.
I think every decade is Beck's decade.
You know which album this is in Beck's repertoire?
Third.
Fifth? It's his fifth album. He had a release in 93, Golden Feelings, 94, 90, two albums in 94, Mellow Gold and Stereophonic, what is that? Soul Humane.
Huh. I had no idea this was that deep into his.
One Foot in the Grave. And then Olay is really the album that took off for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a singular artist too, and he's never like sticking around in one genre. I mean, we know his name now because of Loser, which was basically kind of a grunge and rap mixture.
Yeah.
But he is an interesting dude, man.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Loser. It was a quirky, unconventional track.
Yeah.
And it really, it was released in 94, and it just became like a Gen X
anthem.
Slacker anthem.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, we don't even talk about slacker. Slackers that was a big thing in the 90s.
It was.
Yeah.
It was, and you know, the parents would hear the grunge music and think the grunge bands were slackers and associate their kids with being slackers. It was just,
It was across the board.
Yeah. What else was on this? Let's see.
This.
Devil's Haircut.
Yeah, Devil's Haircut.
Hot Wax, Lord Only Knows. I love the back cover of this.
This album had no less than 5 singles.
And Where It's At's like the biggest one. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good song too.
But Beck he had more releases. He had 7 releases in the 90s.
That's nuts. I mean, he's prolific for sure.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
I mean, from a guy who was just making weird music in his apartment to take off like that.
Yeah.
He really was an independent artist that kind of it happened in the right decade.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he kind of a singer-songwriter of the 90s.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of Beck because there are so many artists to talk about.
I think Beck kind of sums up the whole decade.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when he's putting out 7 records in the decade,
yeah.
he's really what 90s youth kind of looked like.
Yeah, for sure. And we got to see him open for U2 for the Joshua Tree 40th anniversary.
Which was a great show.
It was a really good show. This is a good one, man. Anyway, I've only got one Beck album. I need to get more because I remember when I heard Loser the first time, I thought it was ridiculous. And then as I heard it a billion times after that, I'm like, man, this is catchy as hell.
It's one of the songs I don't really get tired of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't get tired of Beck's music.
Yeah. Where It's At's a great song too.
Yeah.
And I love the walking rug dog on the cover too.
It's very it doesn't look terribly designed.
No. It's just, hey, we got a dog
here's a dog jumping.
Yeah, hurtling. No, that's a good one, man. I like it.
So Beck, Odelay. You're up. What do you got?
Well, this is a band called Soul Asylum, and this is Grave Dancers Union. And this is which of their albums do you think this is? This is an MOV press that I just got like 2 years ago.
Well, because I saw him in the 80s a couple times. So it's got to be close to 4 or 5.
This is their 6th.
6th, yeah.
And they're considered an alternative band, but I'd almost say that they're like just on the verge of punk. I mean, they're maybe a little more pop oriented, but they were so close to punk. It's not even funny.
I can't remember if they opened for, it was either the Violent Femmes or Husker Du.
Yeah.
But so, it's like, it's very edgy music.
Yeah. Anyway, this was kind of their breakout record. The singles from this was released October 6, 1992, by the way. Singles from this, Somebody to Shove, great song. My band that I used to be in played that one. Black Gold, also a fantastic song. And the big one on this was Runaway Train.
Yeah.
Thanks to our director, Jacob, we've kept ourselves from YouTube jail by covering up the naughty bits of the children walking on the front here. But Dave Pirner is the dude behind Soul Asylum, and his music is so great. It's kind of that punk edge with the pop blended into it, where the choruses are, you can't forget them, and it's there. You just want to sing along to their music.
It's like power pop punk.
Power punk pop. There you go.
Yeah.
PPP.
PPP.
And this has always been, I mean, I remember the first time I heard Runaway Train, and it was huge. It became a huge single.
A massive hit.
And I was like, man, this is crazy. And this guy's voice is so different. It's not like perfect, it's kind of scratchy and gravelly and maybe a little flat here and there, but there's so much personality in their music, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And they're the reason, he's the reason I love this band. They just put a new album out like a couple months ago that's supposed to be really great too.
I'm sure it is.
Slowly But Surely, I think is the name of their new one. But I've always loved the picture of them at the table on the back here too.
That's a great picture.
Yeah. And of course, the MOVs. I mean, this is number. Oh, that's right. Pick that up and look at what number that is.
666.
I think I got it at Karma.
Yeah.
I think I bought it at Karma, and I saw that was the number. I'm like, this copy is mine, baby. But this band also The album after this, Let Your Dim Light Shine, is also just great. That's got that song Misery on it.
Yeah, they just put out great music.
They do. I mean, and it's not like they're reinventing the wheel or doing it. It's not like they're a grunge band.
No.
They're not an alternative. They're just a rock band.
Yeah, they're just rock band.
You know, who they kind of remind me of is Cracker. I mean, they've got a similar feel. Their songs are catchy as hell. You can't get them out of your head. And both bands came of age in the 90s. So.
Indeed, they did.
Yeah. So we've got Grave Dancers Union by Soul Asylum. So if you haven't checked it out, kids, do it.
That's a good one.
What's your next one?
Well,
just make sure there's no nudity on it.
Well, there may be dog nudity.
Uh-oh. Oh, yeah. What a great...
Blur.
What a great...
Park Life. And Blur is... we haven't talked much about the whole Britpop explosion. And I stayed away from Oasis and Wonderwall because it's funny. Blur was actually more popular than Oasis until Wonderwall took off.
Yep. I never got into them. I just never heard them. I didn't hear them on the radio here much. You were probably listening to college radio stations.
Well,
and stuff, right?
They didn't get played on the radio much.
No.
And we were in the 90s, so there's no handy-dandy little phone to look stuff up. The internet wasn't even really around.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. I mean, the world was 180 degrees from what it is right now.
It was an analog world.
It was an analog world, for sure. You had to actually talk to people or go outside and do something. Yeah.
I was lucky enough to see Blur in San Francisco. We were visiting my brother-in-law, and they were putting on a free concert.
In San Fran?
In San Francisco. And so we went down to see Blur, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was probably 97, maybe?
Wow. So it would have been... Because when did this come out?
Park Life came out. When did Park Life come out? And I have the Blur box set, so Park Life came out.
I've got paperwork here, but I can't find it.
In 94.
94. That's what I was actually going to guess.
And it's probably not... Blur's most well-known song is song number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
That still gets a lot of play at sporting events.
That was all over the place.
Yes.
All over the place in the 90s.
And the thing with Blur is across the whole box set I have, it's like 8 albums. Their sound really never changes.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
But if you like the sound, it's phenomenal.
Hey, man, AC/DC's been doing the same thing for 50 years. I mean, if it works, keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
I've always loved the cover of this. What's the gatefold look like? We're going to open it up. Oh, it's got like handwritten lyrics on the gatefold. That's cool. Huh. Now, are the dogs on the back?
The racing dogs.
It's like a race lineup.
Yeah, it's like a race lineup.
That's really cool.
And this came out in 94.
94.
Yeah.
That's great. No, that's a good one, man. There's so many. There's just so many that don't get a lot of love just because there was so much going on. Right?
Yeah, End of the Century was another big song off this. There were 5 singles.
Back when they'd just release single after single from these albums. But again, like we said, the albums weren't 35 minutes long anymore. They were an hour long. And you know, bands didn't... I don't think bands necessarily wanted to release that much music. I think that they were pushed to do that by the record companies.
Well, yeah, because in this box set, you know, it's heck, they put out what? 7 albums in the 90s, and the first one, Leisure, is a single album. And then, I'm even maybe Modern Life is Rubbish, may even be a single, but then after that, everything's double.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, all bands just started cramming as much music onto CDs as they could. Because you can get like 80 minutes of music on a CD.
Yeah, so by 93 or 94, everything was extended play.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one, man.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that. I have a couple of their CDs that I got when I was working at the record store.
I like Blur quite a bit.
Yeah, that's great. Good one, man. Well, I kind of already talked about this, and everybody understands my love of the Jayhawks, but this is Tomorrow the Green Grass. It's their 4th studio album. Came out February 14th, 1995. This is the first album that has Karen Grotberg as a keyboardist, which she's a huge part of this band, live keyboards and backing vocals. This album put these guys on the map, and it was almost universally adored. And the big song off of this is Blue. And the big thing about this band is you've got that dual lead singer thing. But they've also have this Americana country rock vibe.
Well, and that was another genre that was happening in the 90s.
Yeah. And Tom Sinclair of Entertainment Weekly praised the album as being everything a country rock album should be, and stated that even those who normally can't stand the genre are likely to be seduced by the plaintive vocal harmonies, pristine melodies, and scrappy but lyrical guitar solos.
Nice.
So that's really all you have to say about
that kind of
Jayhawks.
sums it up.
And they're such a great band. We don't need to go too deep into it, but I remember my buddy Kurt, who just passed away this year. He's the reason that I first heard the Jayhawks. I mean, he was such a trailblazer when it came to music. I mean, he loved it all. And the first time I heard this, I was just sucked in for those reasons.
Yeah. It pretty much, that statement pretty much sums it up.
Yeah. Bad Time is actually a Grand Funk Railroad song. And Pray for Me, Two Hearts, Miss Williams guitar, I'd Run Away, Red Song, 10 Little Kids. I mean, the whole album is just a banger.
Just packed.
Yeah. The Jayhawks, Tomorrow the Green Grass.
Nice. That's a good one.
If you haven't listened, you should give it a listen. You'll love it. What's next?
Well, we're going to stay in the kind of the Brit pop phase. And I have to apologize for this horrible, horrible cover, but I got it at a show super cheap. And the vinyl is pristine.
What happened to the cover?
I don't know. So there was a sticker or something on it, and they tried to cut it off or peel it off, and so they damaged the cover.
How much did you get it for? You remember?
Like $11 or $12.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, for vinyl that's in really, really nice shape.
Yeah. So the big song off of this is Bittersweet Symphony, right?
Yeah.
And there's a big story behind
There's
that.
a big, because they kind of ripped off the Rolling Stones, and it put the band in a bit of a, well, they lost a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. They didn't make any of that money, but then
they had to pay it to Jagger and Richards.
Yeah, they had to pay it to the Stones.
Until like 5 years ago.
Yeah, then it was finally settled, and I think the Stones just said, we've got enough money, you can keep it.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a good one.
But, yeah, they, where is it? Oh, so yeah, Bittersweet Symphony. It was the biggest song of the Brit pop era.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, even it was even bigger than Wonderwall.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And I think it just came because really the mid 90s are when Britpop really took off.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I remember that being on all the time, and it's got that like violin part at the beginning. Is that what they got? What did they?
It was the song. Oh, The Last Time. Because the symphonic
part of
introduction.
Oh, okay.
It's just the introduction.
Huh.
And it is pretty much a direct ripoff, but it happens with music all the time.
Oh yeah, there's 12 notes that you can play.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them are bound to be repeated and ripped off for sure. What was there? There was another single off this, right?
Oh yeah, they became with this song. They became one of the biggest bands in the world. I mean, it just.
Not to be confused with the Verve Pipe, which was also a band from the 90s.
Yeah. And this is
just in case you wanted to be confused.
This album is Urban Hymns that came out in 97.
Yeah.
And it was, let's see how many singles. 5.
Wow. Huh.
Bittersweet Symphony, of course, was the one that exploded.
Mm-hmm.
The Drugs Don't Work, Lucky Man, and Sonnet and The Rolling People.
Oh, okay.
And they're from Manchester.
Manchester, England. So is the sticker still on there?
No, it's like they tried to cut it off.
Interesting.
I don't know what happened, but
it makes the cover look pretty cool, though.
It's interesting. I thought about because somebody in one of our Rob Coyle did a reprint of a cover, and I'm like, ooh, I need to do that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do it. Make sure you've got enough cyan, though.
Yeah. Got to have cyan. So Urban Hymns was nominated for the 1998 Mercury Prize. It lost to Bring It On by Gomez.
Interesting.
Which Gomez is another one of those, I guess, Beck-type bands.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the name. I couldn't tell you a song, but that's cool. No, the Verve is, you don't see this album a lot.
No. And that was one of the reasons I wanted it forever. And I'm okay with a bad cover if the vinyl is perfect, because I think the vinyl it looked like it had never been played.
That's awesome. Good purchase, man.
So
good mention. Well, I don't think that you can talk about the 90s. Here's my Walmart press of Stone Temple Pilots core. You can't talk about the 90s without these guys. And they aren't even from Seattle, but they got lumped in with all the Seattle bands. This is the debut studio album by STP, released on Atlantic September 29, 1992. So pretty early in the 90s. And this became a massive commercial success, reaching number 3 on the Billboard 200 by July 1993, and has since been certified 8 times platinum by the RIAA. The album spawned 4 hit singles, including Sex Type Thing, Wicked Garden, Creep, and Plush. Plush would reach number 1 on the Billboard album rock tracks, and the music video received heavy rotation on MTV. Now, we know how big this album was. And again, I was a fan, probably more with these guys than a lot of the other ones, but where they really got me was their next album, Purple.
Yeah.
Which every song is absolutely a banger and essential. But this is an Italian press of this, apparently, because it has a Made in Italy sticker. The album initially received poor reviews despite its commercial success. The band was criticized for allegedly copying the musical style of other alternative acts, particularly Pearl Jam and Nirvana. Retrospectively, Core has been acknowledged as a seminal release of the alternative rock and grunge movement of the early 90s. Core, wow, that is
it's coming right in.
Yeah. I hear that train a-coming right on in. Well, I forgot what I was saying. Core helped propel Stone Temple Pilots into the mainstream and remains their most commercially successful record. And there was a 25th anniversary of this, released in 2017. Scott Weiland is no longer with us. He was just one of those front men that burned very brightly, very quickly, and was gone before you knew it. I mean, he also sang in Velvet Revolver. He put an album out called 12 Bar Blues. He did a Christmas album. Just an amazing voice, but a troubled soul, and that's why he's not with us anymore. But the music is, and there is a new singer for Stone Temple Pilots. His name is Jeff Goot, and he's great because he doesn't like do an impression of Weiland, but it still sounds similar.
Yeah.
But the band is so good, so heavy.
Yeah, those first 4 albums are so good.
Yeah, they're just almost untouchable.
Yeah.
And I need to get the rest of their stuff on vinyl. I'm slowly getting their stuff on vinyl because it hasn't been available.
It's been, and when it is available, it vanishes quickly.
Yeah, and it's expensive. But if you have not listened to Core recently, go grab it online or vinyl, CD, whatever. Give it a listen because it's definitely worth listening to. What's next for you?
Well, let's go back to the Lilith Fair.
Okay.
Alanis Morissette,
Yes.
Jagged Little Pill.
All right.
And this
Love it.
This was one of those albums that in the 90s was everywhere. Came out in 95, and this was her, I think, 3rd release.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 3rd studio release. And to tell you how big this album was, because it's just a single album,
Mm-hmm.
6 singles.
6 singles, and every one of them was played on the radio constantly.
Yeah.
What were the 6? Do you have them there?
Oh, yeah. It's, well, I mean, the big one is iconic.
You ought to know.
Yeah.
Right.
You ought to know. You ought to know what it is.
Yeah. And ironic.
You learn, hand in my pocket, head over feet, and all I really want.
This just blew up. And like we said, what year was this?
96.
96. So, this took all of those steps.
Or I'm sorry, 95.
95. This took all those steps that like Sheryl Crow and Tori Amos and all of these, Sarah McLachlan, all of these ladies were making moves to becoming bigger and bigger stars. And then she releases this and it just exploded. This has sold like 30 million copies.
Oodles of copies.
Yeah. And you can't really talk about the 90s without talking about her. And
No.
she's still out there touring.
Yep, still at it, still going strong.
Yeah.
And it won a Grammy.
Yeah.
I mean, the awards just go on and on with this.
Yeah. You can't overstate how important this record is to this decade, for sure.
And it was, it had a little bit of alt rock in it, but a strong pop sensibility.
Mm-hmm.
It was produced by Michael Jackson songwriter Glenn
Ballard. Yep. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And that would have been a good one for our producer show.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there are those producers that are involved with projects that for that project. Those producers, though, that we talked about were known for multiple projects, multiple millions of albums sold.
Yeah.
And it's, the songs have to be there. And she wrote the songs. She wrote them with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, she just became a phenomenon for the whole decade.
Yeah, and it was at the right time when the Lilith Fair and a lot of female rock bands were really taking off. And I mean, you don't think about the influence that had, but I mean, you look at the music today and how dominant it is with female artists. I mean, Taylor Swift's the queen of music.
All music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that a lot of that came about because of what these women were doing in the 90s.
Yeah. That's great. That's such a good example. I don't have that because I've heard every one of those songs.
Yeah,
1,000 times.
It's one of those that I'd heard all the songs, but when I saw it pop up, I'm like, I got to have this album because it's just one of those that it's a great album to have and just put on.
Yep.
It's kind of I don't want to say it's laid back, but it's it's not high energy. It's a great background music.
Right. It's got a good groove.
Yeah.
The drums on it are great. I think Taylor Hawkins played on this tour with her.
Oh, did he? Yeah.
So, I mean, you cannot dismiss an album that sells this many copies for any reason, for sure. And I've always loved the way that the cover looks too.
Yeah, the cover has a great design.
Yeah. And it definitely stands out in a record store. I was working at a record store when this came out, and it was just
flew off the shelf.
Just keep them right by the register because people are coming in to buy it. Yeah, people are going to come in and spend $19 on a CD of this. Yeah, that's a great one, man. Good.
Alanis.
Good call.
You're up.
Oh, well, I've talked about Wu-Tang, and I think if you look at me, you can see a guy that's really into Wu-Tang Clan. Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. It's the debut studio album by the group, released on November 8th, 1993. So in the middle of all of this grunge and alternative rock, you have a band like Wu-Tang Clan who love karate movies, and that's when these guys popped onto the scene. And you know, there's dudes from the group that aren't around anymore, but in the middle of all of that rock and pop and grunge, you've got these dudes. And released November 9, 1993, Loud Records and RCA Records. The recording took place between late 92 to early 93 at Firehouse Studio in New York City, and the album was produced by the group's de facto leader, RZA. Its title originates from the martial arts films Enter the Dragon and the 36th Chamber of Shaolin. So the singles off this, Protect Your Neck, CREAM, Cream, and Can It All Be So Simple? According to music journalist Ben Yu, the minimalist means of production plays directly into the music's street aesthetic. Because RZA didn't have the best mixing or recording equipment, the album is wrought with a dirty quality. The drums have more bass and are more hard-hitting than they are crisp and clean, and the samples have an eerie, almost haunting type of echo. And the vocals, because each member's voice is already aggressive and gritty, perfectly match the production. So I loved hearing music, whether it was rap or rock or progressive music, with like samples from movies and samples from other things. And these guys really did that really well on this record. And that's why it stands out. And of course, you know, it had the parental advisory sticker on it, which as soon as you put that on something in the 90s, the sales went through the roof.
Well, and this is when the West Coast hip hop scene and the East Coast hip hop scene were kind of butting heads.
Since then, Enter the Wu-Tang became one of the most highly regarded albums in hip hop. It was originally given a rating of 4.5 mics out of 5 in the Source magazine in 1994. However, it was given a classic 5 mic rating in a later issue of the magazine. So, you know, I think they were ahead of their time.
Oh, yeah.
And ahead of everything production-wise. But this album, I don't know, I got it maybe 6-7 years ago, because look at me. Of course I'm going to buy it.
Yeah, why not?
Of course I'm going to buy Enter the Wu-Tang. So it's fun to put on and listen to, and it's got all the bravado of the rap from the era. You know, I grew up in the late 80s and early 90s listening to NWA and 2 Live Crew, because one of my buddies was really into all of that. So, but yeah, it's really crazy to look at how many big R&B and rap groups kind of got their footing in the 90s.
I mean, we've left out a bunch. Public Enemy, Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
I mean,
Snoop Dogg.
Tupac.
Yeah.
I mean there's a litany.
Yeah. And we don't talk about a lot of rap on the show. So that's why I wanted to bring Wu-Tang in.
That's a great one.
Enter the Wu-Tang, folks. Protect your neck. What's next?
All right. Next, the Foo Fighters.
The color and the shape.
Yeah. Out of the, as grunge was kind of fading out, there had to be somebody to take over the mantle. And what better person than Dave Grohl, the drummer from Nirvana?
Yeah, yeah.
And the Foo Fighters just became, well, they still are. They're probably the biggest band in the world now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so unlikely. I mean, that first Foo Fighters record was basically songs that Dave had put together and recorded himself.
I think it was kind of like a demo.
Yeah.
That he was encouraged to do.
Yeah. Because I've seen interviews with him. He's talked about, showing Kurt his songs and not getting the best reception from him about them. That's got to be tough being in a seminal band, the drummer in a seminal trio, and you're a musician and like a student of music, and you want to write your own music, and then the guy that you're trying to impress is Kurt Cobain.
Yeah. And you're like the Scottie Pippen to Kurt Cobain.
Yeah. You're Scottie Pippen to his Michael Jordan.
Yeah,
for sure. This came out in what?
97.
97. Man.
And the big song, Everlong,
which is a staple.
Yeah.
in their show still. Monkey Wrench is the first one.
Yeah, Monkey Wrench is probably the bigger one.
Yeah, I remember hearing that and going, wow, heavy metal Foo Fighters.
They recorded it in, 96 through early 97 and had 3 singles, Monkey Wrench, Everlong, and My Hero.
Which 2 of those are ones that they play all the time.
Yeah, that still get a lot of airplay.
Yeah.
This was their second album. It took them a couple of years to come out because this is when they became the Foo Fighters band. Because this is when Taylor Hawkins joined. And,
Pat Smear.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great record. It's probably my favorite by them, for sure.
And it did hit number 1 on the Billboard chart.
Did it really?
Everlong did.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's great. No, I mean, Dave Grohl, like I've said before, he's kind of like the mayor of rock and roll. Everybody likes him. He's kind of gone through a PR nightmare here in the last couple months.
Yeah, but I think he's even dealt with that pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in a band with Kurt Cobain and you're literally at the top of the heap and then he dies from a drug-fueled suicide, and then, he's had to deal with Taylor Hawkins passing away.
Yeah.
Taylor was the de facto, second dude in this band.
Yeah.
Such a big part of the band and such a great drummer. He's gone through a lot.
Yeah.
But, it's as unlikely as it is for the drummer from Nirvana to have the biggest band in the world. He does.
Yeah, because, I mean, although it came out of the ashes of Nirvana, Foo Fighters is really just a straightforward rock band.
Yeah, just totally different
than
Nirvana.
And I think that's what you need to do if you're reinventing yourself.
Right.
You got to be something totally different from what you were.
Yeah, he sure did, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
That's a good one, man. I like it. This is Teenage Fan Club Grand Prix. And, I'm just reading that the now defunct Formula One racing team SimTech provided the car that appears on the cover. Interesting.
Huh.
So this was released May of 1995. And upon release, Grand Prix received almost unanimous critical acclaim. Andy Gill for the Independent called it winsome and reflective, while Angela Lewis of the same publication described Grand Prix as a breathtakingly superb album with finely honed dynamics, nagging harmonies, and a deceptively simple lyric. In 2018, Q placed Grand Prix at number 72 in its list of the 100 greatest British albums ever. So that tells you. And these guys are kind of under the radar.
Yeah, they didn't have a bunch of releases.
No. But it's power pop at its finest with awesome harmonies. Singles off this are Mellowed Out, Sparky's Dream, Neil Young, Jung, and About You. If you have not listened to these guys, listen to them. I mean, they're an earworm.
Yeah,
The songs
Power
are
pop at its best.
Yeah, the songs are nice and short, 3 chords, beautiful harmonies. It's just fantastic. And I've only come to these guys in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And I mean, really, the whole Britpop scene was like a jump back to the Beatles and all the British invasion.
Yep.
Because those bands were going against what was going on in America with the grunge scene.
Right. No, it's a great one. I've always loved the cover. This is a We Are Vinyl pressing of this that I got from a friend's brother.
Nice.
Who passed away.
Yeah.
And I had listened to him before that, but when I saw that he had their first record and this one, I'm like, oh my gosh, how great. That his collection was second to none.
Yeah.
But Grand Prix, Teenage Fan Club, I defy you to not like it.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you too, Jacob. You should listen to Grand Prix. What's next for you?
Well, you've seen the unboxing.
Yep.
Hopefully you've seen the unboxing.
Yes, a lot of people have. Here, this will hold that up.
It's hefty. And
Not wimpy.
No. This is Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. And this was their third release. This is the big deluxe box set. I think is it 5 albums?
I think so.
Yeah.
This originally came
4 or
out.
5.
When this came out, it was like a triple CD or at least a double CD.
It was a double.
And it was what, 94?
Yeah, this came out in 95.
95. Okay. Because again, at the record store, we couldn't sell this fast enough.
Yeah, it was the original CD release was an hour and 21 minutes long. That's a lot of music.
81 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot of music. But, Billy Corgan has a lot to say.
Yeah, and
sure.
it was produced by Alan Moulder, Billy Corgan, and Flood. And the big song, the song that kind of summed up the 90s for them was 1979, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah. It's a great song.
Yeah.
I mean, of their stuff, I like that one.
Yeah.
Really well.
They had 5 singles from this, Bullet in the Butterfly Wings, 1979, Zero, Tonight, and 33.
That's good.
And it's funny, so in support of Siamese Dream, they had a 13-month tour, and they came off of it and came out with this. They say it's a Beatles-inspired album.
Okay. I can hear that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Corgan has described the album at the time as the wall for Generation X, which is, I can get behind that.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's funny how this box set is. I mean, for a while it was priced super high.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you were lucky to find a copy for $400.
Right. Isn't that nutty?
It is a big box set.
It is.
I mean, if you're getting a box set, this is a good one. It's come down a lot. It's more reasonable.
I see it.
You can probably pick it up for $90.
Yeah. I was going to say, I see it for $80 or $90 nowadays.
Which
I
is
love
a
the
bargain.
artwork on it.
Oh, the artwork inside out.
it. Just go to our YouTube channel and check out his unboxing.
Yeah, because it's
pretty great.
It's a good box set to have. It really is.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, that when this came out, I mean, everybody was buying it. You couldn't find it anywhere. The price went through the roof.
Yeah.
And somebody woke up and said, we need to print more of these.
We need more.
Yeah. That's a really good one. Like I said, I mean, I've just, for some reason, Smashing Pumpkins never really hit with me.
Yeah.
In the 90s. I listen to some of their stuff now, and it does. I think he's great. I think he's a great songwriter. Not a huge fan of his voice.
I like his voice.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
But like 1979, such a great tune, and it's an earworm.
It really is.
There's a lot of music on this.
There is a lot.
Yeah. We listened to it at the store all the time. It seemed like it played for 2 hours.
Imagine that.
Yeah, it almost is. That's a good one, man. It really is.
And it's heavy. I don't know how much this thing weighs, but it's heavy.
Yeah, yeah. Not only in the middle of this decade are there bands like Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins, Stone Temple Pilots, Soundgarden, but this was also a definitive time for Tom Petty. And this is Wildflowers and all the rest. But the original Wildflowers, I was going to school at Ball State when Wildflowers came out. I was working at the Sam Goody at the Muncie Mall. And I remember the first time I listened to this record, I was absolutely blown away. And I knew that it was going to be a big thing for Tom Petty. If you listen to Rick Rubin, Tell It, Tom Petty was just like an open tap of music at the time. But this album, released November 1st, 1994, it was the first album Petty released after signing with Warner Brothers, where he had recorded with part of the Traveling Wilburys, which we mentioned before. Produced by Rick Rubin. The singles from this, the first one, You Don't Know How It Feels. Everybody knows that song. You Wreck Me, another just enormous one. It's Good to Be King. There were only 3 singles from this.
Really?
Yeah. USA Today's Edna Gunderson wrote that in contrast to the adolescent fantasies of fellow rockers such as Aerosmith, who you mentioned, and the Rolling Stones, Petty explored the middle-age reality on an effective album of sweet and sour heartland rock. And I don't know that there's a better way to like describe what this is. But when you listen to this record, Wildflower starts it off. You Don't Know How It Feels. Time to Move On. You Wreck Me. It's Good to Be King. Only a Broken Heart. Don't Fade on Me. Honeybee. Hard on Me. Cabin Down Below. To Find a Friend. A Higher Place. House in the Woods. Crawling Back to You is probably my favorite song on this record. And Wake Up Time. But I love like the paper bag packaging and just the 4 pictures here. And then, there's a couple other pictures of them in the studio and recording on the back. And
this is another one that has a bunch of different releases.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the original album had 15 songs on it, but this version also has all the rest, which there's a song called Something Could Happen, Leave Virginia Alone, which was actually recorded by Rod Stewart, not by Tom Petty at the time. Climb That Hill Blues, Confusion Wheel, California, Harry Green, Hope You Never, Somewhere Under Heaven, Climb That Hill, Hung Up and Overdue. And then there's also home recordings on here. And, I can't believe that Tom Petty's not around anymore. I mean, I know that you're not like a huge fan, but like I said, when I heard this, I was just blown away. And since then, I think everything that he's done. Something else from the 90s of Tom Petty's is Echo, which not a lot of people know real well, but you got to listen to it. It's just something like really, really special was going on with him at that time. And yeah, really for us to have lost he and Prince in the same year is just the ultimate universal kick in the balls.
Yes, it really is.
What's your last one?
My last one. Well, another band that really took off in the 90s, 9 Inch Nails. This is The Fragile. The Fragile. Unlike Eagles, there's a the. And The Fragile came out in 99. So we're closing out the decade, but 9 Inch Nails had 3 releases in the 90s. Broken, their second album, which was an EP, The Downward Spiral, and then The Fragile. And Trent Reznor was touring relentlessly. I mean, he was touring with everyone, and he was doing shows with David Bowie and all kinds of different. He has a very he's almost like a Renaissance man. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good way to describe Trent, because he's branched out into, he's still making music, but he hasn't released a 9 Inch Nails album in
a few years. Yeah.
I think 2020 was the last one.
Yeah.
So, but he's doing soundtracks. Mm. Yeah, he's kind of taking the Danny Elfman track.
Yeah, which I would have brought Boingo's record if I had it on vinyl, because that the one with like the little clown-looking guy on the front, the black and white one. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Trent Reznor he's won Oscars, and he's definitely quite a ways away from what you would have expected from Pretty Hate Machine, right?
Yeah.
I mean, basically ushered in the industrial. He didn't invent it by any means, but brought it to the wider public.
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about bands like Marilyn Manson and all these other bands that Ministry that had a bunch to do with the 90s, but
yeah.
I think 9 Inch Nails was the poster child for that sound.
Yeah, for sure.
And that experimental.
Yeah, and you also did an unboxing of this.
Yeah.
So you go to our YouTube channel and check out Wheels' unboxing of this. You can see what's in there.
Yes. And 9 Inch Nails, they pop up, but they're not. It's not one of those pedestrian. It's not easy to find. You kind of have to search them out.
Yeah. When they release stuff on vinyl, it just gets snatched up.
It gets snapped up pretty quick.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to get both the Downward Spiral and this, and I'm not a huge fan, but I had the opportunity, so I'm like, give them to me. I mean, I'm not going to pass that up, because I've seen it happen. He who hesitates pays more later. We need to put that on T-shirts.
Yeah, that could be our new motto. Don't hesitate.
No, but you're right. I mean, you don't see their stuff used at shows. If you see it at shows, it's new.
Yeah,
and it's not around long.
No.
So that's a really good one. I need to dig back into 9 Inch Nails, because from my perspective, in '94, I was 20 when the Downward Spiral came out, and I had a hard time like latching onto it.
Yeah, and really from was it really Closer is the song that became
what people know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's so much else out there.
Yeah.
This one's really good. With Teeth is good.
Yes.
It's not music that you're just going to like. I don't think you're going to just put this on and let it play in the background.
No.
It's not like jazz.
Yeah, probably the big song on this is The Day the World Went Away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're just a very experimental band.
Yeah, and not afraid to take those chances.
No.
And I've never seen them live, but I've heard their live shows are just unbelievable.
They are great.
Yeah. That's a good one, man. It's a good one to end on.
What's your last pick of this?
My last pick is another rap R&B favorite, and it's Midnight Marauders by a Tribe Called Quest. This is their third studio album, released November 9th, 1993 on Jive Records. Recording sessions for the album occurred at Battery Studios, Platinum Island Studios, and Sorcerer Sound in New York City. The production was mainly handled by Q-Tip, of course, with contributions from Skef Anslem, Large Professor, and the group's DJ, Al-Shahid Muhammad. The singles off this: Award Tour, Electric Relaxation, and Oh My God. And I don't think that you can overstate the importance of groups like Wu-Tang and A Tribe Called Quest and all of these different hip-hop bands that really gained their footing in the 90s among all these other rock and pop groups. The critical reception, this was generally well received by music critics, with Vibe hailing it as a rap classic and NME calling it the group's most complete work to date. The album before this, Low End Theory, is kind of one that everybody goes to. I don't have it on vinyl, so I didn't bring it, but I've talked about A Tribe Called Quest before. And, they almost take parts of R&B and rap and jazz and kind of fuse it all together. And it's just not like a lot of stuff that you have heard before or since. And I love listening to stuff like this just to kind of, open my mind up and cleanse the palate. I've talked about jazz doing that too. It's just not your typical way of thinking. And that's why I enjoy it so much. James Bernard of Entertainment Weekly stated that the album sounds as fresh as People's Instinctive Travels, praising its smooth as butter production and whimsical vibe. And in The Source, they credited the group for doing what they've always done, ignore all the current trends in hip-hop and deliver a solid collectible, adding that they rely solely on their street poetry. So that's kind of...
That pretty much sums it up.
That pretty much sums it up. And I love the artwork too, the pictures of the dudes on the back. And
it's one of those album covers that when you see it, you know exactly what it is.
Yeah, you can recall right back to it. There's so much music out there. There's so much stuff, not just from the 90s. There's so much stuff like that just is an instant transport back to that time. And let's get Kenny back up here because, our friend Kenny Rogers.
Our third wheel.
We want you guys to join in on the discussion. Tell us what some of your favorite 90s records are. Go to our YouTube channel. Watch all that stuff. I mean, you could break a finger flipping through all the stuff on the YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
What else do we want people to do, John?
Like, subscribe, and share.
And comment. And the share is especially important.
Yeah, because we need to build our audience.
Yeah, and we've done a really good job. We've had a lot of help, but we've done a really good job over the last 2 years building that subscribership. But we want to get even higher numbers than we have. We've talked about the 90s for a long time. Occasionally these records will pop into a show, but we've never done... We could do 10 more 90s shows.
Yeah. After you start flipping through your collection, you're like, oh my.
Yeah. But like he said, we want you to comment, have a conversation with us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Tell us what you want us to talk about and what you'd like us to see. Is there anything else that we would need them to do?
That's it.
That's it. Just make sure that you flip through your records and find something to listen to that you don't always listen to, because it solidifies and deepens your relationship with your collection. That would be my suggestion. So for Wheels, for Kenny, I'm Jay. We'll see you all the next time around.
That was good.